Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to complex numbers. Now, what are complex numbers? These are numbers that mathematicians made up so we could make square root of negative numbers possible. Because if you try to put this into a calculator, you will get an error message. What it is, I denotes an imaginary or complex number. What I is the square root of negative 1. So with a number such as square root of 81, negative 81, we can rewrite it as the square root of negative 1 times 81. Well, since we know that the square root of negative 1 is I, we can pull that out. And what's left is the square root of 81, which we know is 9. So your answer now becomes 9i. This is useful when you have expressions where you deal with the square root of negative numbers. For example, to solve this, we would subtract 50 from both sides. And then we would divide by 2, so we get x squared equals negative 25. Now to get rid of this square, we have to square root both sides. Uh-oh. So what we can do is, since we have the square root of negative 25, we can x equals, anytime we take the square root of x, our answer is going to be plus or minus. The square root of negative 1 is I, and the square root of 25 is 5. So your answer is x equals plus or minus 5i. Mind-blowing. Let's do another example. Say we have 1/3. Okay. Subtract 3 from both sides. Now to cancel this 1/3, we're going to multiply both sides by 3, or the reciprocal. So now we have x squared equals negative 9. Again, square root both sides. So x equals now plus or minus, the square root of negative 1 is I, and the square root of 9 is 3. Plus or minus 3i. Now, we also have problems or situations where we have powers on I. For example, I taken to the 26th power. Now, the easiest way to think about this is to write I1, and make the middle two negative. Then write I equals I squared, I cubed, and I to the 4th. So I squared equals negative 1. I cubed equals negative I, and I to the 4th equals negative 1. This is because if you think about, I equals the square root of negative 1. So I squared is I times I, which is the square root of negative 1 times the square root of negative 1. If I asked you what is the square root of 9 times the square root of 9, well, the square root of 9 is 3, and the square root of 9 again is 3. 3 times 3 is 9. The square root of something times that is that. So the square root of negative 1 times the square root of negative 1 equals negative 1. Using this logic, you can determine I cubed and I to the 4th. Now, a nice quick way to solve problems like this is to take the power that is on I, in this case it's 26, and divide it by 4. Well, it doesn't go into it evenly, but it goes into it 6 times with a remainder of 2. Take the remainder and put it on I. And what is I squared? Negative 1. So I to the 26th equals negative 1. Let's take another look at that. Say I have I to the 16th. 16 divided by 4 is 4 with a 0 remainder. And I to the 0 power, as anything to the 0 power, is 1. So I to the 16th is 1. Now, you can use this to solve similar expressions. Say we have 2 plus I times 3 minus I. What you can do is treat this as if I were just x and FOIL it. So 2 times 3 gives me 6. I times 3 is 3I minus 2I and then minus I squared. From here you can combine like terms. So we've got 6 plus I minus I squared. And what was I squared? Well, it was negative 1 times negative 1, which we know is just negative 1. So we can replace I squared with negative 1. So this becomes 6 plus I minus negative 1. Two negatives make a positive. So our final answer is 7 plus I. And that right there is complex numbers uncomplicated.